Hi again, it's Jennifer, and I'm back with more of my favorite crafty things of 2016. This is my second video for today. The first video focused on dies, my favorite dies of the year. This one focuses on die cutting essentials, and I'll also talk about my favorite embossing folders. Now, remember that I do link to the products I talk about in my YouTube description, but I encourage you to go over to my blog for additional sources for these products and big discount codes and giveaways. It's worth checking out. Okay, so let's go ahead with the die cutting essentials. These are tools that are very helpful with die cutting, and I have tried many things. I have some new ones for you today and some old favorites. Now, the machine you see me use the most in videos is the sizzix Big Shot machine. This is a great quality machine, and sizzix is a great company who backs their products. It has a handle so you can pick this up and take it on the go. You do turn the crank to feed everything through, so this is not electronic. It does, however, come with everything you need to do die cutting. So it comes with the plates that you need to use the traditional thick dies. It comes with everything you need to do die cutting with the thin wafer thin dies. You can also do embossing folders with this. So this is kind of like your good basic die cutting machine that I highly recommend. Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate quickly in case you've never seen die cutting before. Basically, you take your wafer thin die, which is what most people use these days, put it face down on the paper and run it through your machine. You can also do it the opposite way, where you put the die face up and then put the paper on top. Either way works fine from what I've found. Another machine that I really like is the electric Big Shot. It's called the Big Shot Express. You can see it looks like the one I just showed you, but it's wider because the motor is there on the bottom, and it has a button that allows you to feed in both directions without having to turn a crank. So this is something to keep in mind if you do a lot of die cutting or have arthritis. This is much easier to use. I am going to be using this in my new craft room because I'll have a little drawer with a plug in it for it. This is a great machine, and I find it works just as well as the regular Big Shot, but with the motor. Okay, so now I wanted to talk about the plates. So the Big Shot machines come with cutting plates. You have one on the bottom and one on the top when you do your die cutting. I always keep the one on the bottom to be the one that gets beat up. You can see that one on the left is very beat up. Then I try to keep my top plate as clear as possible. And I don't switch those positions. The cutting one's always on the bottom and the clean one's always on the top, but I do flip them so that they don't warp, and I never have any problems with warping. However, if yours start to get really beat up, I recommend getting a set of new plates. It's something that really helps with getting good results. What I like to do is get one new plate out of the pack and take the one that I had been using as my clean plate before and putting that on the bottom as the cutting plate. So I'm always using one newer plate and one older plate. So these really last quite some time, but it's good to have some spares on hand. Okay, another thing that I recommend big time for die cutting is the metal adapter plate from Memory Box. I put it right onto the platform on my Big Shot and under the bottom cutting plate. You want to make sure that that metal adapter plate never touches your die. You don't want to damage it, so it goes under your cutting plate. This is like a shim that allows you to cut better. Sometimes you don't need it, but I find that I almost always use it. Another product that I recommend so you can get more life out of your dies is an embossing pad. This one's from Spellbinders. It's very inexpensive. You can see there's a little dimension to it and it's very soft. What you do is you put this down in between your cutting plates, and it allows you to impress with the die instead of cut with it. So you can get more out of your dies because you can do embossing with it. So here, let me demonstrate. What you want to do is flip open to tab 1 on your Big Shot. If you have a different die cutting machine, you want to use your machine how you would an embossing folder. You put the cutting plate with the embossing pad on top, put the paper on it, put the die face down on it, put the other cutting plate on top, and push it through. Now that embossing pad, the thickness of it, allows that die to press into the paper instead of cut. So you get this really cool looking dry embossing with any die that you may have. Now again, you want to just run that through your machine how you would any embossing folder with whatever die cut machine you have. I wanted to show you with a background die how beautiful this is for backgrounds. This is a little inker die, one of my favorites of the year. and it cuts tiny little holes all over the entire background. Well, instead I'm using it with the embossing pad, so it's going to press that pattern into the paper instead of cut it, and it's just gorgeous. A great way to get more life out of those dies, and that embossing pad is very inexpensive. Okay, so the next tool is one that I tried a long time ago. I wasn't impressed. Then I tried it again and realized I was using it wrong, and I am over the moon about it and very, very excited about it. It helps with getting all the pieces out of your die. So the product that I'm talking about is the Spellbinders Tool-in-One. So it's this tool that you see here. On the one end, on the left, you can take out the tips and replace it with other little tools that are helpful with die cutting. They're easy to replace. Now, to be honest with you, I don't use this end as much. It's the other end that I use more often, although I do use this piercer quite often too. Now, what you do is you run this over the back of your die and it gets all the little pieces out. But what I found to be helpful to prevent making a mess is to put down a microfiber cloth below it. So you can pop out all those little pieces, but look at all those left behind. This is what I do. I put it upside down on a microfiber cloth, and then I run that tool along the back, and it forces all those tiny little pieces out instead of having to do them individually. And the microfiber cloth captures them and keeps them from flying everywhere. You could instead just do it over a trash can if you want to, but I like doing it over the cloth, and then I can clean up with that cloth, kind of holds those little pieces, and then go shake that out over my trash can. I found this has been a huge time saver for me with all of the die cutting that I do. I use these microfiber cloths, which is another one of my recommended products, to clean up things in my work surface, and I just throw them in the wash. Now I do have some pieces stuck in the die itself. You can use the tool with this too if you want to, right onto the paper. Again, you could do it over a trash can if you prefer. Now let me show you another way you can use this tool. Instead of doing two separate steps like I just did, while it's still stuck in your die, everything's still stuck in your die, use the tool on the back of it, right over the fiber cloth, and it will take all the pieces and kind of press that die out at once. So there we did it all at once, saved me a load of time, and all those little pieces are stuck to that cloth, so I can just go shake that out over a trash can. So I think this tool is good for anybody who does a lot of die cutting, especially with intricate dies like this one, where little pieces sometimes get stuck behind. Now the next tool I'm sharing is definitely my most used tool in the craft room. This guy is my best friend. This is my pivot hand vac. I am in love with him. He is great because I can quickly just push the button, swing it open. It's a cordless hand vac, very lightweight, and I can just quickly suck up any tiny little bits that I don't need on my desk. I end up with little pieces all over of like the release paper from my double-sided tape, of little die cut pieces. I always have a mess. Ask my friends at a craft retreat, it's like a bomb of paper went off around me. But if I have this, I can quickly suck up those pieces as I go. You just put it back on the charger to charge it so you have more life out of it. You just pop the side open over a trash can to empty it. This is a handy little guy. This is a newer version of the one that I recommended last year. Both are great, and I can't recommend it enough. Okay, another product I think you need for die cutting is a good pair of snips, or wire cutters that have a nice fine tip so that you can get them into your little dies to cut them apart. Many dies come connected by a little wire or little piece of metal because that's part of the process that they go through to make them. But you do need to cut them apart, and they can be very sharp. So you want to make sure that you do this in a safe way. So what I have here is a 6-inch bowl that is magnetic. This is a fantastic tool to have in your craft room. What you can do is when you're cutting off those little pieces of metal, you do it right over that magnetic bowl so that that little piece of metal doesn't shoot across the room, because trust me, it will. So I do it right over the bowl of metal. You could do it over like a piece of magnetic paper, but that helps to keep the pieces from flying around. You could instead do it over maybe a cloth that you want to make sure to throw away. You just want to be sure to not let those metal pieces fly. So you definitely need a pair of good snips that you use just for cutting apart your metal dies. Now let's go back to this bowl. One of the other handy things about this bowl is, I don't know about you, but I sometimes lose little pieces or little dies when I'm creating. If you have a magnetic bowl, you can put all those pieces in there. It holds your paper pieces in there, but check it out, those metal dies won't get lost. So you can just have this on your work surface to keep your dies all in line while you're creating, and then you can put them all away when you're done. My friend Heather came up with this idea, and I think it's brilliant, and I can't recommend this little bowl enough. Now, another product that's very similar is this tool from Spellbinders, and it's magnetic on the front. So you can run this over your work surface and it'll pick up all your metal dies, or you can just stick your metal dies to it while you're creating. Check out how strong it is. It'll just pick up those dies. It's kind of fun to play with too. You can just prop this up on your work surface and just stick the dies on there as you're creating. So it's just another option as a tool to have to keep your dies under control. You could either use this or the bowl. Speaking of bowls, I do recommend having a set of small bowls in your craft room. This is a great place to keep tiny little pieces that you may create that you don't want to lose. My friend Christina Warner gave me a set of bowls like the one you see here, but I do recommend having a set. I will link to a set from Amazon that's great. They're plastic, so you don't have to worry about them breaking, and they're great colors, but it's great to kind of keep control of all your little pieces as you're creating. Okay, now another product that is a for sure must-have is micropore tape. So this is micropore tape. It's thin and it tears super easy, and it comes off the paper easy, so you won't tear your paper when you pull it off. It's easy to reuse. I use this to hold my dies down as I run them through my die cut machine. Now, I normally use the micropore tape that has a little dispenser so you can tear off the pieces, but I ran out and I don't have any more, so I'm waiting for it to come in stock. So that's why you see me use the larger roll there. But I do find that it's very helpful to hold things in place as you're die cutting, and you can reuse those pieces over and over. I tell you, I love micropore tape. Now for die storage, I use these pockets. These are from Simon Says Stamp, and it has a flap that tucks into another flap. These are very durable. They have reinforced edges, so you don't have to worry about any dies getting out. They're smaller, so most dies fit into them. I also cut pieces of magnetic paper to go inside of the pockets if I have a bunch of dies that I want to keep nice and tidy. And if dies don't fit in these smaller ones, I store them in a large stamp pocket like the one you see there on the left. This is what I normally store my 4x6 stamp sets in, but for larger dies it works. But I do prefer those smaller pockets for most of my dies because they're durable, smaller, and inexpensive. Now there is one product I had to mention on the die cutting day, and this is the Stick It double-sided adhesive product. It comes in sheets with release paper on each side, and I just go ahead and put my paper that I need onto the sticky, and then I cut it out so that there is adhesive on one entire side of the paper. Then I die cut my cardstock, and this allows me to end up with a die cut that has sticky on the back of it so I can easily add it to my project. This is especially helpful with intricate dies that are hard to add adhesive to after you've die cut. Now what's nice about the Stick It product, actually there's a couple things nice about it. The first is that it's very, very thin, so it die cuts beautifully. You don't have to worry about it. A lot of other double-sided tapes are thicker and don't die cut as nice. The other thing about Stick It that's great is you can kind of put it down and see if that's where you want it, and if not, you can lift it up and you can move it around. And once you're happy with where it is, you want to press it down firmly with maybe like a bone folder. I just rub a bone folder across it, and then it'll stick permanently. So I like that I have the flexibility to kind of move the die cut around until I get it perfectly placed. Then I can press it down and it'll stay put. So it's a great product if you're into a lot of die cutting. I do recommend the Stick It. It comes in smaller pieces and bigger pieces. I, of course, go for the bigger pack since it'll last longer. Okay, so before we go, I also wanted to mention a few embossing folders. Now for embossing folders, I switched to the tab 1 on my Big Shot machine. Now some embossing folders might need a shim, some don't. I encourage you to test each one out. The first embossing folder that I really like is Tailored Expressions Cross Stitch Embossing Folder. I put down one cutting plate, my paper with the embossing folder, and then the other cutting plate on top of that, and run it through my machine. Remember to never force anything. If it feels too tight, just back it off and remove one of the tabs, and you'll be okay. Check out this beautiful cross stitch pattern this embossing folder makes. I just think that this is a great universal embossing folders that works with a variety of cards. There are a lot of embossing folders on the market. I'm just sharing the ones that I feel have the most life to them and have beautiful patterns. And the nice thing is embossing folders are inexpensive. This one's from Tim Holtz, and I just think that's a classic background. And his embossing folders are called texture fades, so they give a lot of dimension to them, and I just think that's classic. Now, another embossing folder that Tim Holtz created is this dot background. This is, of course, a background that would work with pretty much any card, and they fit nicely. The pattern fits nicely on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. You could do this just on the front of the card if you want to, by running it through your die cut machine sideways. Okay, the last 2 embossing folders that I wanted to share with you are a new type. You can see that red is thicker. This is a thicker embossing folder. So you're going to need to run this through your die cut machine a little bit differently. Instead of using the 2 cutting plates, you're only using 1 on top, because this is a thicker embossing folder. And this is the pattern you get. This is the leaves background. It gives a lot of like shadows to it, a lot of raised and lowered. It just has a lot more dimension than most embossing folders. So you can see the one pattern here. The other one that I like from this series is the basketweave. And again, this is a thicker embossing folder, so you just use 1 cutting plate, and check it out. Such a gorgeous, gorgeous background. So there are only a few available in these sizzix 3D embossing folders right now, but these 2 are definitely my favorite. And I use them on the 2 cards that you see here. So just wanted to share a few great embossing folders. Again, they're inexpensive, so they're a great tool to have. Okay, so there's a fast run through of my favorite die cutting essentials of 2016. A lot of them are the same as last year, which is a good thing, right? And just a few new tools. If you're interested, they're linked below my YouTube description, but remember, on my blog, I have links to many more sources, and I have discount codes and giveaways, so be sure to head there. Now, if you haven't yet, please check out my favorite dies video that I put up today. And a couple days ago, I put up my favorite stamps. So in the middle, you can click to see that dies video, and also you can click the other button to see all of the My Favorite Things Crafty series for 2016. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll come back for my next video, which is all about inks. See you soon.